Tony asked me to speak on compelled by love in reaching others. So I'd like to start by asking you a question this evening. And the question is, what has Jesus done for you? Why do you love him? When the thrill of being asked to speak at the conference said that I kind of calmed down, I said to God, what on earth do you want me to say? And God instantly said to me, you love because I first loved you. So I wanted to start by telling you what Jesus has done for me, because I am forever in debt to him. My husband Steve and I were in business, and we ran quite a large modern gym in our town with quite a different ethos to anything else locally, and it was very successful in our first few years. And then the local authority decided to invest in their rundown gym just just down the road really from where we were. And after we'd invested a great deal and worked very hard to establish the business over 3 years, we found that we suddenly couldn't compete. And we had to diversify and invest again, and so we started a second business, printing and embroidering clothing. So for another 3 years, we worked every hour that God sent. And the second business was also successful, but to sustain things, to keep the two going and to sustain the investment that we'd made, Steve and I were both working not much short of 90 hours a week, every week for years, and carrying significant financial pressure as well. And after 7 years, I just had enough. But we couldn't get out. We were like ships passing in the night. I had 1 day off before our first child was born, and I went back to work a week later with her and was like, being a mum and doing all the business stuff, and we did that for years. I had a week off after my son was born, though. But we couldn't sell the businesses. We couldn't just close them. Gym equipment is enormous. Where do you even put that kind of stuff, And there was just no way out for us. We were exhausted, we were stressed, and we were absolutely desperate to get out of the situation. Things were very hopeless. And it's hard to now articulate just how bad things were, really. But to give you an idea, I considered ending my life 2 times during that period. And then we received 3 very large orders for us, for some personalised workwear for a local refinery in the town. And within a week of receiving each order, we received an unexpected bill or cost that we weren't expecting, which just took the profit away from the order. And it happened 3 times in about 6 to 8 weeks. And I said to Steve, something is seriously wrong here. This isn't natural. People don't work as hard as we work and then get the business in. That was no problem for it to just disappear. Steve wasn't a believer at the time, and I'd left church years before. But we decided to go and see a Christian couple that my parents recommended. And over 2 evenings, I poured out my heart. I was a blubbering wreck, and Steve's looking at me. like, why are you telling these people all this stuff, Anyway, at the end of 2 evenings, they said to us, we just don't think you're doing what God wants you to do. Well, I could have killed them. I know. Steve was really gracious. I was so angry. I thought, if that's all you've got for me, after I've poured out my heart. Anyway, about a month later, it was the first week of January in 2011, and I dropped the kids off at school, and I was walking back to the business, and out of nowhere, I hadn't been in church for years, out of nowhere, this chorus came into my head, scripture. Behold, I will do something new among you. Now it will spring forth. Will you not be aware of it? I will even make a roadway in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. I will do something new. And I knew it was God. And I knew that it was the first week of January, and I knew it was going to be in that calendar year. And I thought, I've done this for 7 years. I've hung on. I can hang on for another 12 months. Over the next 6 months, I started bumping into people that used to be in church with me as a child or as I was growing up and stuff, and were no longer going anywhere. And I started to make a list. And then some Christian friends came over to see us one night, and they mentioned the book of Haggai. And Steve was working late, and kids were in bed, so I sat down at my dining room table and opened the book of Haggai. and God just hit me like a bolt of lightning. It's the only way I can describe it. Chapter 1 of Haggai described our exact business experience, absolutely word for word. And it said that God blew away the blessing, those 3 orders. That's like, God blew it away. And it says, why? It says, because you are busy building your own house while my house remains a ruin. And it says, gather the remnant of the people. And I had about 40 people on my list then, and build. So Steve came home, it was about 11 o'clock, and he came home with a work friend at the time. I was waiting for him for leave, and then we had a curry. And then I said, Steve, we've got to start a church. So, and he's quite an incredible man. So he said, well, you'll have to do it, and I'll just come and make the coffee. So my dad had a building, so 3 months later, we started the church. And a lady who had backslidden, she was in church with me as a child, I said to her, we're starting a church, and she was so afraid that going back to church would mean her losing her husband, who wasn't a believer. So I said, well, let's invite him. So we invited Pete, and he came, and he got saved. And his whole family in the church with us. And then 2 ladies who'd never been to church before, they just turned up, and they got saved. And then Steve was our 4th convert. Yeah. It was a bit slow. It took us 4 months before he... So, yeah, he was too busy making the tea. And so it's continued, really. I haven't got time to tell you about all the salvations, but over the last 6 years, one by one, we're introducing the town of Milford Haven to Jesus. 12 months to the day after God spoke to me out of Haggai, our gym sold. 5 months later, our printing and embroidery business sold. And we became debt-free for the first time in 9 years. And I no longer have to work. And Steve's a county councillor, and God is using him in his relationships there, and that's very wonderful. But Jesus rescued me. He saved our marriage. He saved my life. He restored our stepkids to us. My kids love him. Our kids love him. My sister-in-law's been healed. How can I not tell other people about Jesus? When I was talking to God about what I was going to say tonight, he said, you love because I first loved you. I said, yes, Lord, I love you because of what you've done for me. And then he said, now you go love because I first loved you. I was walking the dog a few days ago, and I was thinking about this, and you might remember this because it's about a worm. But there was a worm crawling across the pavement in front of me. And he had about 3 foot of the pavement still to crawl. And then he had to cross the road in the way he was heading. And then he'd have the pavement the other side of the road. And then he was going to hit the paved yards of the terraced houses where we live. And then he was going to come up against the wall of a house. There's no hope for this worm in the direction he was going. No nourishment, no fulfillment, no nothing, And behind him, only 1 foot away, was our town's memorial gardens. Worm heaven. And I know it's a worm, but I felt such conviction in my heart. Would I love enough to stop and go back and turn that worm around? So Barnaby, my dog, and I, we walked back, and I picked up the worm. And if it was a slug, I might not have, but it was only a worm. So I picked up the worm and I flung him into the gardens. But I felt God say to me, for as much as you do for the least of my brethren, you've done it unto me. And one last thing I want to say. I don't know if you know this, but people are waiting to be introduced to Jesus. Our son Elwood is 7 years old, and he got baptized a few weeks ago. And I asked him if he'd like to invite anybody. Now, his older sister calls him Elwood the evangelist. So I said, Elwood, do you want to invite anybody to your baptism? So he said, a few friends from school. I said, OK, that's fine. And the football team mum. So now, I have spent a year breaking down the preconceived ideas that the football team mums had about me being the church mum. And it's taken me about a year. Now we have a great laugh. But initially, I could just feel she goes to church bit, Anyway, now Elwood wants me to invite them all to the baptismal service. But I thought, how can I not? How can I not? So I posted an invitation on our football team Facebook group. I just thought, I'll just put it out there. So I invited them. And there's about an hour's silence. Nobody's commenting, nobody's liking the post. I think, oh, goodness me, you know. And then one mum comes on and she says, thank you so much for the invitation. We'd love to come. And then another one, we'd be honoured to come. Thank you for inviting us. And then another one, thank you for the invite. We'll be there. We had 30 visitors that morning. All the 4 football coaches came with their families, and they stayed with us for lunch, and they really enjoyed the service, you know. When I turned up in school the next morning at the school playground, one of the grandmothers of one of the football boys came rushing up to me, and she said, my daughter told me all about Elwood's baptism service. She said, it sounds lovely. Actually, it was very wet, very windy. Elwood almost changed his mind because we get baptised in the sea, and he was only little. So she said, oh, I heard it was lovely, you know. And then she says, please, can I come to your church? So she's been, the last 2 weeks, she's come. And after the first time she came, then on the Monday morning then, just last week, her husband stopped me at the school gate, and he says, what have you done to my wife? She is so happy. Yeah. Now, he's not interested in church yet, but the last 2 weeks, he has stopped me and said something. This last week, he just grabbed my arm and gave me a squeeze, you know? And I said to him, you're next. Life is about Jesus. And he rescued me. I am forever indebted to Jesus. Just have a think what he's done for you. How can we not tell others?